Thank you. Thank you. What a most gracious welcome. And I'm a little embarrassed hearing Pam say all those nice things, but more to the point, she's kind of set the bar up here. I don't know. Now I got to clear that bar, right? I got involved with moved to the Greater Chicago North a couple of years ago, and we were forming at that time. What are we all about? What do we do? What is it we need to do? And what we realized is this, that somewhere in the vicinity of 80% of Americans who knew about Citizens United and big money influence in our politics wanted that changed. The problem is that too few Americans knew about it. So education was going to be really important. Well, I do presentations for a living, leadership presentations that Pam alluded to. And so I thought, I'll put a presentation together. And that's what I've done, and that's what I'm going to show you now. This is about providing education. I want you to know what's going on. There's some crazy stuff happening, and the origin of it is even crazier. And the result of that is this country probably isn't working the way you want it to work. So I'm hoping that by the time you hear about this, you will be motivated to get up and do more. You're already motivated. I know that because you're here this morning. Beyond that, though, I'm hoping that when you learn what you're going to learn today, you'll want to do more. You'll want to get involved. And it's important, you want to get more people involved. You want to bring along some people you know and get them involved, because it's going to take a certain mass of us to make a difference. So let's deal with some basics here. Let's all agree David Cobb is the headliner today. So I want you to consider me his warm-up act.
Now you're setting my bar too high.
So sorry, deal with it. This program is called You're Not Getting What You Want. I want to make this personal. This is about you. This isn't some amorphous, oh, they're stealing our democracy that you can't identify with very well. I'm telling you, you personally are not getting what you want. Let's see if I can make that case later on, and you'll decide if I have. Here we go. Or when the dice are loaded, you can't win. I just kind of like that. It's not of any value, but I like it. I wonder if you have ever had the feeling like, I'm just one person. And I don't have a big megaphone like those guys with the big mouths you see on TV. How in the world can I make a difference? Well, I'm going to ask you for the next hour to put your doubt on standby. In this sense, Margaret Mead told us, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. This is about you and me and some of our friends getting together and being that small group of thoughtful, committed citizens. So put your doubt on standby, accept as an article of faith for the moment that we can make a difference. And let's see if I can make that case. What we're talking, I'm going to tell you, well, that was a little fast with a button there, wasn't it? I'm actually kind of far from the computer. This thing's a little sluggish. So that you're really clear, I'm going to show you 9 actions you can take to make a difference. 9 specific things that you can do. You're not going to remake the world with any one of these, but all of this accumulates. And let's see if we can figure this out. We'll talk about what brought us here, just a little run through history. I want you to understand what's happened, because when you do, you're going to have a feeling of outrage. There's some crazy, crazy things that have happened. We'll talk about what we have now. What's really going on? And part of that is you're not getting what you want. And finally, how do we move forward? That's the 9 actions. That's what we're going to do today. I will tell you, it is all about money. It's all about big money. We're going to talk about campaign contributions and expenditures. We'll talk about third parties like super PACs. And we'll touch a little bit on lobbying of legislators. You'd be just astonished at the amount of money that's being spent by lobbyists, and it matters. It has a huge impact. You remember, I'm looking around this room and I figure everybody here is old enough to remember Watergate. Just say yes, you are. And you may remember that Woodward and Bernstein had a guy helping them to figure out what was going on. It was Mark Felt. He was also known as Deep Throat. We're not going to go into the origin of that, though you may remember. Here's the point. Here's his admonition to them. If they wanted to figure out what was really going on in Watergate, follow the money. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to follow the money. This is all about money. And what money means. Control, power, things like that. I'll say it one more time. You're not getting what you want because there's so much money. So, let's start here. Quick spin through history. In 1907, there was a Tillman Act, and one of the things that happened with that Tillman Act is it prohibited corporations from contributing to campaigns. Think that's a good idea? Yes. So did they. They thought it was a pretty good idea, too. 1947, Taft-Hartley. This is the oddest thing, but because it was fundamentally an anti-union bill, but what it provided for was prohibiting unions and corporations from spending money to influence elections. The term now is electioneering. More on that later. But no, neither one of them. Now, it's a false equivalency now because the unions aren't nearly as powerful as they once were. But that was the law, and it was to prevent undue influence on our elections. 1971, the Federal Election Campaign Act set limits on contributions and required disclosure. It was a sunshine law. This is all pretty good stuff, right? After that, 1990, Austin versus the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. There were prohibitions on corporate contributions to campaigns. Went to the Michigan Supreme Court, and in the majority opinion, citing against Austin, they upheld the Michigan Campaign Finance Act, saying corporate wealth can unfairly influence elections. Do you believe that was right?
Yes.
Yeah, it is right. Of course it is. How about 2002, the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, commonly known as McCain-Feingold? There were many provisions to that, which are, of course, being chipped away incrementally now. But one of them had to do with regulation of financing of political campaigns and the aforementioned electioneering. The electioneering was, you can't electioneer, try to influence elections within 30 days of a primary or 60 days of a general election. And it's going to turn out to be a very significant provision as we move forward. A year later, McConnell v. Federal Election Commission, that's McConnell as in Mitch McConnell, he did not like McCain-Feingold, and he filed suit, and he lost. All of these were provisions to protect against big money having undue influence in our elections. Now let's go back and another piece of history. That is the beginning of Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, and it reads, "No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Nor shall any state deprive any person," get that? Let's see, citizens, person, "of life, liberty, or property without due process of law in order to deny any," what is it again? Oh, person. No. "Within its jurisdiction, the equal protection." That's the equal protection and due process clauses. Take a look at the date of that. What was this all about? Yeah, it was about making full citizens of the now freed former slaves, right? That was the whole point of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Now I want you to move forward in history just 18 years. There's a case, Santa Clara County versus the Southern Pacific Railroad. We're not going to get deep into the nuts and bolts of this, but the basics are that the state of California put together its new constitution, and its taxation regulations were different than, higher than the federal statutes. And the Southern Pacific Railroad didn't like that because that was going to cost them more money. They're going to have to pay more taxes. And so they did what any upright corporation would do. They just stopped paying their taxes for 3 years. And finally, Santa Clara County had enough. They filed suit. Make them pay their taxes. And indeed, the county won. In the district court, they won in the appellate court, and then it went to the Supreme Court because the railroad wasn't done. And in fact, the railroad won their case at the Supreme Court level. Chief Justice Morrison Rennick White was a sick man. This is one of the last cases he heard, but this was decided. It was a simple tax jurisdiction case, and they decided it. Here's the interesting and really harmful part of this. The court reporter was a fellow by the name of J.C. Bancroft Davis, a former railroad executive. And back in those days, the court reporter's job, it was a very prestigious job. And in fact, the court reporter actually made more money than the Chief Justice did. And he got to do what all court reporters have done before and since. He took down the proceedings of the case. He recorded them. and then, as now, provided a little bit of orientation to future readers as they read about this case. He populated an area called the head notes. He wrote a head note, which is just a description by the court reporter of here's what you're about to read in the context of it. It carries no force of law, it's just an orienting paragraph. And here's what court reporter J.C. Bancroft Davis wrote. The defendant corporations are persons within the intent of the clause of Section 1 of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. The court reporter wrote that. The Chief Justice, the other justices, they didn't say anything about that. But in the head notes, that's what the court reporter wrote, and guess what? That got picked up and enforced as though it had the force of law. And this simple tax jurisdiction case wound up giving the same rights as people to corporations. Now, there are those who say this started earlier than that. That's fine. Here's a truly outrageous piece. This court reporter is saying that corporations have the same rights as are indicated for human beings in the 14th Amendment, the right of due process, equal protection, and so forth. You can argue whether corporations should have those rights, but that amendment had nothing to do with corporations. It was all about people. But that was the start of corporations being people, my friend. And the story gets worse. The story gets worse. 2008, a not-for-profit called Citizens United wanted to show what they called a documentary about Hillary Clinton. Ooh, they did not like Hillary Clinton, did not want her to win those primaries, and they wanted to show their documentary, imagine quotation marks around that, on TV ads before these primaries. Well, remember what I told you about McCain-Feingold? It prohibited electioneering within 30 days of a primary and within 60 days of a general election. And they were enjoined from showing their film. And they filed suit. And they lost at the district level. At the appellate level, they lost there too. The judge hearing that case said, this is not a 30-minute documentary. This is a 30-second attack ad stretched out to 30 minutes. It's not a documentary. This is an attempt to electioneer. You lose, Citizens United. And they appealed to the Supreme Court. And in 2010, the Supreme Court heard that case, and they made a decision, and they decided in favor of Citizens United, saying that that provision of McCain-Feingold was not constitutional. That's what they said. That should have been the end of it, right? They had filed suit so that they could show their movie. They won, should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. It turned out the Chief Justice John Roberts caused the litigants to come back and relitigate this case on different grounds, testing the rights of corporations and speech equivalency. Now this is outrageous in the extreme. This is something that never happens. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court doesn't call litigants back and have them litigate something that wasn't part of a case. But that is exactly what happened. And guess what? Citizens United won, you lost. They legislated from the bench on issues that were not even involved in the case. The court found that the First Amendment does not allow prohibitions of speech based on the identity of the speaker. Even if the speaker is a corporation. Writing from the majority, here's what Chief Justice Anthony Kennedy had to say. If the First Amendment has any force, it prohibits Congress from fining or jailing citizens or associations of citizens for simply engaging in political speech. Fining or jailing? Does that make any sense to you? Because it doesn't to me. But in any event, that's what the 5-4 majority had to say about this case. Effectively, that says corporations have the same First Amendment rights as corporations. So now we're extending the rights of corporations beyond due process and equal protection. Now that Bill of Rights all applies to corporations. That's what happened. That is the headquarters for Koch Industries. Does that look like a person to you? But the Supreme Court can't seem to tell the difference. What it comes down to. In writing for the minority, Justice John Paul Stevens wrote that the court's ruling threatens to undermine the integrity of elected institutions across the nation. the path the majority has taken to reach its outcome will, I fear, do damage to this institution. How do you feel about the Supreme Court right now? Boo. Not so good, right? Not so good. And that's the problem. They have undermined our belief in, our trust in our elected institutions and the Supreme Court itself. Those folks used to be held in highest esteem among the professions. And it wasn't that long ago, but they aren't anymore. A democracy cannot function effectively when its constituent members believe laws are being bought and sold. That's what Chief Justice John Paul Stevens said. Do you believe laws are being bought and sold?
Yes, they are.
That's a problem if we believe that. Well, it's not a problem we believe that. It's a problem that it's the case. No, it is a problem that we believe that. Because I'm going to ask you again in just a moment. How can we have a democracy if we believe our laws are being bought and sold? How in the world can we have a real democracy? He also said in addressing an issue that was not raised by the litigants, the majority changed the case to give themselves an opportunity to change the law. It's exactly what they did. Remember all those protections against undue influence of big money in our politics? That one case wiped them out. Every one of them. They're gone. And more. That's how we Americans felt about this Citizens United decision just a few weeks after the decision. Those red bars are people saying, we don't like this, we want it changed. 86% of Democrats, 81% of independents, and 76% of Republicans say we don't like it. This is not a partisan issue. I want you to get that. I wrote on my blog a couple of weeks ago, people have to get over ridiculing Occupy because there's no formal hierarchy, because there's no formal spokesperson, because there's no head of the organization. And people have to stop and get over ridiculing Tea Party people just because some are flamboyant. We all feel the same way about this issue. We are joined. I don't care what your political beliefs are. 8 out of 10 Americans say this is bad. And oh, by the way, an updated number is 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 Americans say we want this big money out of our politics. So, oh wait, remember I said the story gets worse? It gets worser.
It's not a word.
It is now. That is Sean McCutcheon. He is a businessman in Birmingham, Alabama, and Sean McCutcheon has more money than he possibly knows what to do with, but he does know he likes to use it in politics. He likes to make political contributions. You can intuit for yourself why he might like to do that. That's your right to do that. I don't know what's inside Sean McCutcheon's head. What I do know is that he filed suit to knock down limits on political contributions, 2 in particular. The maximum allowable to any one candidate in an election, in any one election cycle, it's $5,200 for a primary and a general. And to take the lid off the aggregate total of what can be spent. Well, he didn't get his way with the individual limit, but he sure did with the aggregate limit. The Supreme Court popped the lid off of that. Effectively, that means that extremely wealthy people have far more influence over our elections and governing than anyone else. Sean McCutcheon can literally give millions and millions of dollars to, say, one party. Do you think that that party might be interested in what's important to Sean McCutcheon? Do you think those folks might be able to get his ear? More on that in just a moment. At the end of the day, the votes of big money donors count more than yours. Sometimes the votes are in the ballot box, and sometimes they're in their dollars that turn into most of the electioneering that you see on TV. And people are influenced by that. You perhaps not as much. You're pretty well informed, but the bulk of our citizenry is not well informed, and they are affected by that, and that affects the outcomes of elections. As does election decisions being given to the Supreme Court. George Bush, Al Gore. All right, let's move on here. Let's talk about what we have now. That was the prelude to where we're at right now. That chart was updated just 2 days ago. This is outside spending, PAC money, for example. And take a look at this. This is starting with each election cycle from 1990 to today. Notice that big jump from 2010 to 2012? What do you think made that to happen? Citizens United. Citizens United is what did it. That was the big jump. We haven't quite caught up yet, but we're getting there. All that big money, so much of it is going to the PACs and the super PACs. Well, it gets more complicated than that in this way. There are over 1,400 of these groups. I couldn't find a total number, but there's over 1,400. And so far in this election cycle, which is just now really getting cranked up, they've already spent $250 million. That's what they've spent so far. We have another 52 days to go until the election. And oh, by the way, 94% of that money is coming from just 200 people. 94%. 200 people are making the decision about what you learn about candidates. And they are influencing opinions all around the country. Just 200 people. That does not include you, just so you know. You're not one of them. All right. That guy is W. Edwards Deming. He is the father of the quality movement. This is the guy who went to Japan and taught quality to the Japanese following World War II. And in doing his teaching, he had his points, his principles. And one of them was, when there is a problem, look to the system for the cause, not the individual. I'm going to tell you right now, we do not have a Congress full of scumbags. They're not all dishonest crooks. It isn't that way. These are a bunch of people who are working in a system that forces them to do things that almost none of them want to do. It is the system. It comes down to this. We have a system that requires big money in order to get elected and stay elected. That's how it works. If you don't want to play that way, you don't get there and you don't stay there. You have to get all sorts of big money. And if you do the math, you can't run a campaign on $3 contributions from citizens. Dennis Anderson, where are you? There we go. Dennis Anderson is a candidate in the 14th District of Illinois, and I asked if he would be, did I get that right? Yeah. I asked if he would say a couple of words about this issue of raising money for a campaign, and what's it like when you don't have access to big money donors. Please, Dennis, could you say a couple of words?
Yeah, I'd like to say, first of all, I'm a great collector of old political cartoons, and one of my favorites is this guy sitting in a lawyer's office, and the lawyer behind the desk is saying, well, Mr. Jones, just how much justice can you afford? And I think that's entirely apt and appropriate to this. And that guy behind the desk is the system, and the guy, the client is the American people. We're losing. I am a small candidate. This is it's an extremely grassroots campaign. We're running on fumes at all times. And I like that. I like the fact that 75% of my donors are under $100. But whenever the media or some organization from whom I'm seeking an endorsement questions me, one of the first questions they ask is, how much have you raised? And on that basis, they determine viability. And that is wrong. It ought not be on how much I've raised, but on what my ideas are. And, it's extraordinarily frustrating to be running as a micro-dollar candidate in a congressional campaign. We're spending less than any other candidate or candidacy in the country. And we'll continue to do so.
Dennis, is it fair to say, go ahead, give a round of applause. I don't think that this man deserves your applause. He's standing up for what he believes in, and he's putting his neck out there and taking a chance that he just might be able to make things better. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Now, is it a fair statement that without access to big money, people are giving you $10,000, $30,000, $50,000 checks, you're at a significant disadvantage?
Oh, yes.
I thought I might have that right. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Get that this is real life stuff. This is not some amorphous concept that's going on out there. You want to run for office? I got to tell you something. This is tough. I looked at running for Congress in the 10th Congressional District for the 2012 cycle, decided against it because I could not stomach the nonstop begging for money. Couldn't do it. I want to make a difference, so I found other ways to do it, like what I'm doing right now on my blog and so forth. But what I want you to get is that it's really hard to do this kind of stuff. I don't mean it's hard to stand up and say what you believe in. I'm telling you it's hard to get the microphone, have anyone paying any attention until you have an enormous amount of money. That's not how it's supposed to work. Go read James Madison, and you'll find out all about that. So, I want to say just a little bit more about that. Here's the deal. Candidates are compromised by the need for big money. Again, they're not all crooks. They're playing in a system that makes them play that way. There is almost no other way to do it. Here's what Tom Friedman had to say about that very thing. He says, in order to get and stay elected today, you have to raise huge sums of money from corporations, wealthy individuals, and dues-laden unions. I don't know what unions he was thinking of, but that's what he wrote. Further, he said, and all that money leads to twisted decision-making at the high politics level and regulatory capture at the bureaucratic administrative level. You think all that money leads to twisted decision-making? Yeah, you think? I want to talk about the 2012 election. I don't have this up there, but I will just tell you I didn't run for office in the 2012 election cycle. It took $10 million to get the job done in one congressional district for a 2-year term. $10 million. It was $2.1 billion, not million, billion in the presidential contest. That's how much money was spent, $10 billion in all for all the federal seats. It's an insane amount of money. That is double what was spent in 2008. Now wait a minute. How come it doubled from 2008 to the next presidential election? What happened? Citizens United. You seeing a pattern here? There we go. That's 8 times what was spent a generation ago. You know, the Kennedy-Nixon campaign, that was considered the first televised presidential campaign, right? How much money do you think they spent on that? In the two candidates together, what did they spend for that, to run for office? $500,000. Wow. I like your thinking, but no, it was more than that. It was $14 million, which is the equivalent of $109 million in 2013 dollars. So just tell me something. It's the same office, right? It's the presidency of the United States. That did not change. The process did not change, but we went from $109 million to $2.1 billion. Putting most of that, just the concept of that, it puts most of us out of the running. It shuts the door to most of us to participate in our democracy. Back to Justice Stevens, he wrote that even if the exchange of votes for expenditures or contributions could not be shown, contributors gain favorable political access from such expenditures. Can you imagine that happens if people get favorable access? Is that possible? Wait a minute. Larry Bartels from the Woodrow Wilson School did a study on this. He studied what happens, who gets the ear of our senators. And he wrote, in almost every instance, senators appear to be considerably more responsive to the opinions of affluent constituents. Blah, blah, blah. People at the bottom of the income distribution chain, nobody's listening to them. In fact, if you're poor, nobody even knows you're alive. Those of us in the middle income, they know we're here, but they're not listening. That's exactly what he found. There's a paper coming out in a couple of months by Gillens and Page from Princeton and Northwestern universities, studying the same thing. They look at just short of 1,800 policy decisions at the federal level. What influences people? And here's what they found. The central point emerges from our research is that economic elites and organized groups representing business interests have substantial independent impacts on U.S. government policy. You suppose that's true? While mass-based interest groups and average citizens have little or no independent influence. Study after study has shown the very same thing. Here, Barry Goldwater. I was not a big fan of Barry Goldwater. Remember that 64 election? It was between a nutcase and a crook. Remember that? We elected the crook, and it turned out he was a nutcase. Our nation is facing a crisis of liberty if we do not control campaign expenditures. We must prove that elective office is not for sale. We must convince the public that elected officials are what James Madison intended us to be, agents of the sovereign people, not the hired hands of rich givers, or what Madison called factions. Well, you know what? I already told you, I wasn't a big fan of Barry Goldwater, but I think he got this one right. Do you suppose it works the way he wanted it to work? Have you seen Robert Reich's film, Inequality for All? Yeah, good. Here's a scene from that movie.
When so many resources, so much money, so much wealth, so much income accumulates at the very top, that with money comes the capacity to control politics.
If nothing sinister, the way it starts, usually they bring in somebody you haven't seen for a few years. You know they're paying them 10 grand. Might be the best man in your wedding or a guy you played football with. You say, Eddie, hell, I haven't seen you. And then they say, no, I'd like to turn it over to old Freckles here. And then they give you the whole load.
But money, I mean, do the lobbyists come in? And obviously the unspoken reality is we can help you win your next election if you cooperate with us.
There's a guy in every office to say so-and-so wants to see you. He's from the American Shoe Leather Company. They have maxed out, meaning they gave you the maximum in your primary when you first started. They gave you the maximum in every general. You've run 3 times now, and they were there for you at every point. And what for? Access.
That was 3-term Republican Senator Alan Simpson from Wyoming. And what was that word he just used? Access. It was access. That's what he had to say. Do you suppose these wealthy contributors have access to our elected officials? That is exactly what's going on. And if you want to try an experiment to find out how that's working for you, I want you to place a call to your congressperson or your senator and see who you talk to. The staffer will answer the phone and they'll be very nice. I promise you they will. And you leave a message, I want to talk to my congressperson. I want to talk to my senator. Have them call me back. Right. Right. Just listen, don't stop your life waiting for that call back. Because it's not going to happen. You don't have their ear unless you gave them a lot of money. That's our study done by Pew Research on the Americans' trust in our government from 1960 to 2013. Can you notice a trend in that graph? We are at 19%. That is to say, I want you to get the full impact of this. 81 out of 100 Americans does not trust our government. 81 of 100 of us don't trust our government. How in the world do we have a democracy when that's going on? And one of the biggest drivers of not trusting our government is knowing you don't have a voice, knowing the wealthy people are getting what they want and you are not. We've got a problem with democracy in our country. There are those who claim it's already an oligarchy. Oligarchy, that means rule by the rich. Okay, there you go. It's all about the money in our politics. Our democracy is being held hostage to the funders of campaigns, which is to say, big money is the mother of all of our political dysfunction. I'm not talking about people who have legitimately different points of view, valid positions. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who are speaking just because big money is pouring cash into their coffers. You are not getting what you want. I told you I was going to do my best to make the case that you're not getting what you want, and I'm going to give you a few examples and see how you feel about this. You care about guns and gun safety? That is a Bushmaster automatic assault rifle. It is the rifle that was used to kill 20 little kids and 7 teachers at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Right after that event, 90% of Americans wanted universal background checks on the sale of all firearms. All we want to do is make sure that my crazy neighbor doesn't get his hands on a gun. He can live there, that's okay. I don't want his hands on firearms. I want to make sure that violent felons don't have firearms. And our problem is that we're not checking all these guys. And in fact, we're only checking about half of them. There's only background checks when guns are sold at gun stores, not between individuals, not at gun shows. And I'll tell you something else. 90% of us wanted universal background checks. 81% of the NRA members wanted universal background checks. Everybody wants four to five out of, either 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, depending which group you're looking at, wanted universal background checks for sales of firearms. How'd that work for us? I'm telling you, you didn't get what you wanted. You wanted universal background checks on guns. At least 9 out of 10 of us in this room did, and we didn't get it. And here's why. Because the NRA spent over $12 million on the 2012 election cycle. And they went around the halls of Congress telling our Congress people, our senators, remember that money we gave you in the last election? And the one before that, and the one before that? If you vote for universal background checks for sales of firearms, not only will you not get that money this next election cycle, 2012, we will give it to whoever opposes you. They run around the halls of Congress scaring the hell out of our legislators. And that is why you don't have universal background checks on guns. You're not getting what you want when it comes to gun safety legislation. Let's try another topic. I wonder if you care about student debt. You know anybody with carrying some student debt?
My daughter.
Yeah, daughter? Right. This is one of the major drivers of our kids living in our basement. The average debt of a college graduate, a recent graduate, is $33,000. And oh, by the way, most of them cannot get a job in their chosen field. If they can get a job at all, it's minimum wage. Try repaying your student debt on that. That's a problem. Right now, there are $1.1 trillion of student debt outstanding, and a third of that is past due or in collection. We recently had a vote in the Senate to allow kids with student debt to refinance at lower rates. It's a huge difference in a monthly payment at 4% versus a current 8 or 9% loan. That went down in flames. Elizabeth Warren had something to say about that. This is not a direct quote, but basically what she said is, with this vote, we'll tell the American people who we work for, the rich bankers or the American citizens. And they told us loud and clear, they're not working for us. You know the Carlyle Group? That's just one company. They're a financial organization, and one of the things that they do is they collect past due debts. They make a lot of money collecting on past due student debt. And they didn't want this refinance thing going on because it would cut into their business. Oh, by the way, in the last election cycle, they spent $1.4 million in political donations and $1.9 million lobbying. I don't suppose that had any influence on our senators' votes, do you? Might have. You're not getting the student debt legislation you want. Let's try another topic. How about energy and climate change? Do you care about that? Do you care about the environment? Maybe you care if you could set your kitchen faucet water on fire like that lady can. Maybe you care if you knew one of those 11 guys who died and was never found after that explosion in the BP Deepwater Horizon well. They dumped 4 million barrels of crude oil in the Gulf of Mexico. That's 150 million gallons, and compounded that with 250,000 gallons of toxic, mutagenic dispersant, and some real funky looking shrimp and fish washing up on the shores of Louisiana and Mississippi right now. Maybe you care about the billions of tons of carbon dioxide we're putting in the air. You might care about that. How come we don't have a climate bill? What's that all about? 97% of climate scientists say the Earth is warming. The other 3 guys, I don't know what's going on with them. Let's talk about big energy in 2011. How about this? They spent $146 million lobbying Congress. That's $250,000 for every legislator. I'm talking about House and Senate. They made an average $40,000 contribution to each senator. Do you think they had the ear? This is big energy. They had the ear of our Congress. And while this was going on, they were getting $4.4 billion in tax breaks. These are the wealthiest corporations the world has ever known, and we're giving them $4.4 billion in tax breaks. as they spend $543 million to kill the climate bill. You're not getting what you want.
So what
What's
connects
this?
the dots between new jobs and cleaner air, a manufacturing renaissance, and energy security? American natural gas. The fact is, America is now the world's #1 natural gas producer, thanks to safe, proven hydraulic fracturing technology, making clean-burning domestic natural gas the fuel of choice. From advanced technology to a re-energized American economy, natural gas connects them all. Log on to learn more.
What was it she said? Safe, proven hydraulic fracturing technology. Is that what she said? I can tell you, I've listened to this a few times to make sure I got it right. That is exactly what she said. Safe, proven hydraulic fracturing technology. You want to know how safe it is? And how proven it is? The natural gas industry's own figures say that 50% of fracking wells leak methane. 50% of them. That's like half. According to the EPA, they're putting 15.5 billion cubic feet of methane into the air every year. And oh, by the way, methane is 84 times greater, has an 84 times greater impact on climate warming than carbon dioxide over a 20-year period. Safe, proven hydraulic fracturing technology. I think this qualifies for a Pants on Fire award. I think you're not getting the environmental legislation that you want. Now, I told you I was going to do my best to make the case you're not getting what you want. And I'm pretty confident you don't want it to be working this way. Let's try one more example of this. Let's talk about healthcare. Do you care about healthcare? Do you care about healthcare? Bet you do. Maybe you care about little babies, maybe old guys, ordinary families. I bet you care about those folks. Let's talk about healthcare. Well, let's specifically talk about big pharma. Our health care in the aggregate is 18% of our gross domestic product. Big pharma are meds, right? Meds is 1/3 of that. 6% of GDP are the medicines that we take, the stuff that we strap onto our bodies for health reasons. That's 6% of gross domestic product. So we're just going to look at that little piece of it. These folks spent $390 per second fighting Obamacare. That turns out to be a whole lot of money really fast. I want to talk about this guy. Recognize him as Billy Tauzin. He's a good old boy from Louisiana, 20-year congressman. He had been there a long time, and he was leaving Congress at the same time George W. Bush was leaving Congress. Come the 21st of January, he's going to be working someplace else. And you might remember that Bush pushed through Medicare Part D right around that time. And just before the vote, Billy Tauzin crammed a little amendment on top of that. Right on top of that Medicare Part D bill. And here's what it said. The United States government, the biggest purchaser of meds in the world, is not allowed to negotiate for better pricing with Big Pharma. We've got to pay retail. At the end of the day, it comes out like this. The U.S. government has to go buy drugs that they're going to give to you at Walgreens. It's insanity, but that's what he pushed through. Now, here's the rest of the story. Billy Tauzin, as I told you, was leaving office on January 21st, and he immediately got a new job with PHRMA, the lobbying arm of Big Pharma. Nothing suspicious there, right? Well, tell you what, when he got that job, he got a 7,000% increase in pay. Remember I was going to say a couple things about lobbying? You draw your own conclusion from this, but just consider duck logic. If it looks like a duck, walks, you know the rest. You're not getting the lobbying reform you want either, but I want to play with healthcare in just another way, because I want you to get the impact of our healthcare system on you. There was a study done of 17 comparable high-income countries and their health outcomes. Now, I want to differentiate here, just so you're really clear. Obamacare was not about healthcare. It was about access to healthcare. They're not the same things. It made healthcare available to people who formerly didn't have it. But it didn't change the health care delivery that you experience. So let's talk about the healthcare experience that you have. In this study, they found that U.S. men live 3.7 years less than their Swiss counterpart. So if you're a man in America and you have a twin brother living in Switzerland, and we're talking about equivalent socioeconomic conditions, you're going to die 4 years sooner than your brother. That's what that says. If you're a woman, you're going to die almost 6 years sooner than your Japanese counterpart. You're going to die sooner, and this is attributable to the healthcare systems. And the story gets even worse than that. We have the highest rate of infant mortality of 17 comparable countries. Let me say that brutally. We're killing our babies with our healthcare system. We could be doing much better. We're not doing much better. We have the second highest prevalence of HIV, the highest incidence of AIDS, and we have the second highest death rate from ischemic heart disease. And oh, by the way, while all this is going on, we're spending a minimum of double what these other countries are spending. Are you getting the health care you want?
No.
I don't think so. I don't think you're getting the health care you want. And the reason you're not is because Big Pharma and the other people involved in our healthcare system like it this way, because they make more money. Which is to say, they're trading dollars for your life. They'd rather have the dollars than have you live longer. They'd rather have the dollars than save our babies. Influence. Now, I'm going to skip through this because we're tight on time. Suffice it to say that, sorry, it takes a little bit to step through this. That's about tax reform. That's effective corporate tax rate. All those corporations whining about we have the highest corporate tax rate in the world. Our effective tax rate is 12.6%. Forget the 38, 39% they throw out there. The effective tax rate is 12.6%. And it's consistently going down. Let's talk about how we move forward. Let's figure out what you and I and some of our friends can do to make this better. My pal Dan Wartenberg says this: you're perfectly positioned to get exactly the results we're getting right now. Is Dan right? Yeah. If we did something different, we get different results. Yes, Dan is right. Which is to say, we're going to have to do something different. You remember, say, Sir Isaac Newton, your high school science class maybe? He had laws of motion, one of which read this way: every object persists in its state of rest or uniform motion in a straight line unless it is compelled to change by forces impressed upon it. We commonly say that a body in motion tends to stay in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. Guess what? We're the outside force. You and me. Boy. We're the outside force. We have to do this. You know why we have to do this? There's nobody else who will do it. It's up to us. It comes down to that. Watch this.
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are two people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something? I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Well, there's not enough left to do, is it?
She finally, in resignation, says, I'm going to cry. And he says, there's nothing else left to do. I'm showing you this for a couple of reasons. Well, the primary reason is I love it. It's fun. Here's the secondary reason. Sometimes we make ourselves helpless. Like these people made themselves helpless, and we don't have to do that. Sometimes the solution is right in front of us. For them, all they had to do was recognize that the escalator had magically transformed itself into a staircase. For us, it's not quite that obvious, but it's right in front of us just the same. And that's what I want to show you. I put this in the form of a Chinese menu, the We the People Constitutional Repair Menu. Order 2 from column 1, 1 from column 2, and 1 from column 3. Column 1. Oh, by the way, this is the Chinese pictograph for crisis. It's 2 characters. One means danger. The other means opportunity. We have a crisis, and it is dangerous, and we have an opportunity. Column A. Money is not the same as speech. Money is property. All right, a case can be made that money is a speech equivalent. After all, we use money, for example, to buy television advertising time, right? We use money to print flyers. So there's a case that can be made. But even if that's the case, money in politics may be regulated. More on that in just a minute. Column 2, corporations are not people and don't have all the same rights as people. And finally, the Congress shall have the power to implement legislation to make those things happen. Basically, it comes down to that. That's the staircase in front of us. That's what we have to make happen. A little more on that. Let's talk about this speech thing. That is the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, and it reads, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. Could it be any clearer? It is written in the absolute. But wait a minute, can we regulate speech? Can we do that? Yeah. Let's try this out. We may not slander or libel another person. You know what? That constricts my right to free speech if I can't lie about you, right? We have agreed that constricting my right to lie about you is more important than an absolute right of free speech. And we take it for granted that it works this way, just as we take it for granted that nobody can't shout fire at a crowded theater, because we've decided that our mutual safety is more important than my right to blurt out whatever I want to blurt out. Sure. Yeah, I live in Northbrook. We have a regulation in Northbrook. You can have 1 political sign on the lawn per registered voter in the house. And no, it can't go on the parkway between the sidewalk and the street. It's got to go on our own property. That's the law. We've decided in Northbrook that our right to free speech like that limits us so that we don't make our lawn a forest of political signs. We've agreed that that's important, and all of that constricts free speech. Just as that, one of the few remaining provisions of the Federal Election Campaign Act is the maximum you can give in a campaign cycle. Look, we have agreed as a country, yes, we can regulate speech. We can put limits on speech. We do it all the time. So even though the First Amendment is written in the absolute, and I get there are Constitution thumpers who want to say it's in the absolute, no, you can't regulate speech, but yeah, we do it all the time and we take it for granted. So, let's talk about this. Corporations are not people and don't have the same rights of people. Do I really have to explain that? I hope not.
The Supreme Court.
Yeah. So column C, Congress shall have the power to implement this. Remember that graph? This is what we want. We want to be able to regulate money in our politics. We want to say that corporations don't have all the same rights as people. Sure, they all have rights, and we'll decide what they are. We, the people, will make that decision. That's what this is about. Here's an idea. This came from Tom Hartman, as a matter of fact. There's an outfit called CELDF, I can't remember the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund. And they have put together model legislation. They are primarily focused on the issue of fracking. But on their website, you can find model legislation for exactly this. And what Hartman recommends, and I think this is a pretty cool idea, go find the legislation, bring it to your town and say, here, pass this. It won't stand up. No, it won't stand up. But get them to pass it. Make the statement, this is what we want. Yes, it'll get challenged. You'll probably wind up with a court case. What if, say, tens of thousands of cities and towns did that? Wow, what an impact that would have. Eventually, it's going to require a constitutional amendment, and I think David Cobb will probably have a few words about that later on. It's going to take a constitutional amendment. And as you know, we can do that by a constitutional convention. That's not going to happen. Or by passage of 2/3 vote of both the houses of Congress and plus ratification of 3/4 of the states. Wow, does that feel like a heavy pull? Does that feel like an uphill battle? Does that feel like a daunting challenge? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, it is. Let me show you how daunting that is. Let's talk about just, say, 3 amendments. Let's talk about the Pay for Congress amendment. This is the one that says if pay is increased for our people in Congress, it doesn't go into effect until the next Congress. This is kind of a good idea. It keeps our politicians from just lining their own pockets at our expense. That was proposed at our constitutional convention in 1789. It took 202 years to pass it. And it became the 27th Amendment. It took 1991 is when that passed. Let's try another one. How about women's suffrage? Boy, that was a long pull. Arguably, it started with Jane Addams. But it was finally sent for ratification in 1919. It took 14 months. Come on. It took 14 months to get that passed. That's a significant improvement over 202 years. And that became our 19th Amendment. How about the right of 18-year-olds to vote? Well, that was proposed in 1971. It took 3 months to get that done. 3 months. This can get done, and no, it doesn't have to take 202 years. Yes, it's hard, and it's doable. The solution is right in front of us. The staircase to go get where we want to go is a constitutional amendment. Watch this.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
I wonder if you saw that movie. You saw that movie? I'm as mad as hell, I'm not going to take it anymore. I'm telling you right now, I'm mad as hell. I'm not parroting him. I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. And you talking along with him? I'm guessing you have that same passion inside of you. This is not right. I will tell you that Tom Hartman said it a bit more elegantly. He said, change happens when citizens stand up and say, I won't have it anymore. Well, I won't. I won't have it anymore. This is going to change, and we're going to make it change, you and I and some of our friends.
You have to start walking up the staircase.
Yeah, take a step. And we've taken some steps. In the 2012 election, a whole bunch of the townships around here got ballot referenda put on the ballots to say this is what we want. To be able to regulate money in our politics, and corporations don't have the same right of speech. Pam tells me there's one on the 2014 ballot in Edwardsville County? Edwards County. Here's what I want to tell you about the 2012 election cycle. There were ballot referenda on hundreds of ballots all across the country. Every one of them passed. Every one of them. By between 64 and 90%. This is what we the people want. We're not alone. This is all across the country. 16 states and over 600 cities and towns have passed referenda like that. I'm proud to tell you that Illinois is one of them. That's a piece of the bill that the Illinois House and Senate sent to Washington. This is what we the people want. I really like the wording in this. I'm gonna go past this. Go look it up. It's a good piece of legislation. It's not legislation, but it's a statement of this is what we want. Yeah, that's where you can look it up. I'll be glad to give it to you later if you want. This constitutional amendment. Maybe you knew about Tom Udall's bill, the Senate Joint Resolution 19. He had a bill that would have allowed for regulation of money in our politics. He didn't include the corporations are not people and don't have all the same rights as people. That was not part of his bill. Well, it got voted down this week. It didn't happen. Is that important? Yeah, it's important, but here's what I want to tell you. It's a start. It's a start. There are people in America who know about this now who didn't know about this before this bill was put up. There will be another. You know about Larry Lessig? Yeah. Larry Lessig has done the most crazy thing. He has put together a super PAC, Make1.us. It's the sole purpose of the super PAC is to eliminate all super PACs. And I like the way he says it. He says, just embrace the irony. That's the point. There are people doing things in all sorts of different ways, all for the same reason, to get that big money influence out of our politics, so our government is of we the people, by we the people, and for we the people, not the special interest groups. Speaking to the Israeli Knesset, President Obama said political leaders will never take risks if the people do not push them to take some risks. Do you think he's right about that? They're going to play it safe unless we hold their feet to the fire. You must create the change you want to see. Ordinary people that can accomplish extraordinary things. So I'm going to ask you a question. Ask you to look deep inside yourself. It's not about me. It's not about this principle. It's about you. What's your vision for America? What is the America you believe in? Now, I want to really make this visceral. What's your vision of America for your children and your grandchildren? What do you want them to inherit? Just give that some consideration. What is the America you want them to inherit? Here's what I want to tell you about that. We're crafting what they're going to inherit right now. We're making what they're going to inherit. If we don't make the kind of America that we believe in, they're not going to inherit it. And it's up to us to take some action. What are you willing to do to make that happen? Let's see, where am I? Here's some ideas. Be informed. It's why you're here, right? You wanted to learn some things. Maybe you wanted to hang out with some like-minded people, but you wanted to learn some things. Continue to be informed. Here's what Tom Jefferson had to say about that. An enlightened citizenry is indispensable for the proper functioning of a democracy, or a republic. Self-government is not possible unless the citizens are educated sufficiently to enable them to exercise oversight. I want to play with that oversight thing for just a moment. Did you imagine that your citizen responsibility was over when you left the voting booth? It's not. It is our ever consistent duty to exercise oversight, to make sure that the people that we elect to lead us are leading us the way we want them to lead us. You're not getting what you want, so it's up to you and up to me to exercise that oversight. You want to stay informed? Look up, listen to Ring of Fire Radio. That's Joe Papantonio and me, Mike Papantonio rather, and I at the event that we held on the North Shore earlier this year. Look up his website and listen to what he and Bobby Kennedy and Sam Cedar have to say and their guests. Be informed. Be active. Be part of the solution. Here's what Tom Paine said about that. These are the times that try men's souls. Is your soul tried?
Yes.
The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will in this crisis shrink from the service of his country, but he that stands by it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. And I gotta tell you, it's time for us to stand up. This is not the time for a sunshine patriot. This is the time for us to stand up and do it consistently.
Oh, thank goodness we're coming out of the asteroid field.
Let's get out of here. Ready for light speed? 1, 2, 3. It's still serious.
No light speed.
It's not fair. It's not my fault. That's what our hero said, right? How's that working for him? Probably not. I'm telling you, they're not useful. It is not useful if we don't say it's not fair, it's not my fault. It's just not useful. I want to get the point across. This is exactly why we have to make our voices heard. We're not getting what we want. We're not leaving the kind of country to our children that we want to leave to them. This next piece is all caps. I want you to get this point. This is critical. If we don't make our voices heard, people who want a very different America from the one that you want will be heard because they'll be the only ones talking. If you fail to speak up, it won't keep them from speaking up. They have the big megaphone already. And the only way to defeat that is for us to collectively make a bigger megaphone. We have to make our voices heard. Let's talk about how we can make our voices heard. I told you I had 9 things you could do. Here we go. Number 1. Come on. Subscribe to my blog. Does that sound just horribly self-serving? It's not what it's about. This is a conversation. This is a conversation. I invite you to subscribe, read it, and then provide your comments. Help in the dialogue. Help us to see things differently, see things better. I've got business cards in the...
Nation magazine is pretty good.
Yeah, but my blog isn't there. I've got business cards on the chair in back there. Grab them on the way out and take a look. Take a look. In fact, I have a request. The blog comes out every Sunday morning. Just have a look tomorrow morning and see what you think. And offer your comments. It's about duty to service. See what you think. It's free too, by the way. And no, I don't clog your inbox with lots of blogs. It's once a week, every now and then twice a week. Second, what else can you do? Enlist 2 more people. Go to your neighbor next door and say, hey, I want to talk to you about something. This is a safe topic to talk about. I told you, 9 out of 10 Americans are going to agree with you. You're not going to get pushback on this. Enlist 2 more people, and then you know what you do? You bring them to a move to amend meeting. Kay, can you help them figure out how to do that?
Absolutely. See me.
See Kay Gamble afterward. Okay, let's try this. Sign a petition for a ballot referendum. Would there perhaps someplace around here be a move to amend petitions people can sign?
Absolutely.
Where are they, Kay?
They're right here.
Okay. Sign the petition. Sign the petition. Tell Congress this is what we the people want. There are things you can do before you even leave here today. And they're all simple. They're all easy. How about one more? Oh, the CELDF thing. But more than anything else, vote! Vote. Did you forget the date? It's November 4th. 52 days from now. Well, I guess it's 53, isn't it? Because it's Tuesday. Vote number 5. You want to know how powerful your vote is? Oh, I'm just one vote. The average turnout in this area in non-presidential year elections is 37%. Only 1 of 3 registered voters bothers to show up. Effectively, what that says is your vote counts double what it counts in a presidential year election. Show up and vote. Bring your crazy brother-in-law with you. Bring your neighbor with you. Don't go to the poll alone. For protection against abuses by legislatures, the people must resort to the polls, not the courts. Well, so says Chief Justice Morrison Remick Waite, the same guy with the Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad case. But bear in mind, he was a good guy. He was the court reporter who was the bad guy. He's right. Go to the polls. And let me say it a different way. We don't have to win this election. We just have to stop the other guys from stealing it. Try some more things. Go to Larry Lessig's site. Kick in a couple of bucks and help him kill super PACs. Attend a rally. Well, this is in there prior to the vote for Udall. But you know what? There will be another attempt at an amendment. So attend a rally for the next constitutional amendment. Show up. You don't have to chant. Bring comfortable shoes. Show up. Finally, get me invited to present other places. I do this for free. This is from the heart. This is a mission of service. Have me present to another group. I'll come and do it freebie anytime I can fit it in my schedule. Do this for yourself, for your kids, for your grandchildren. I love what Dr. King had to say. I don't know what the future holds, but I know who holds the future. And so do you.
The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
I know you remember that. Maybe that stirred something in you back then, but I will tell you that he was right then, and he's still right. Ask what you can do for your country, and this is what you can do for your country. This is a call to service right now, and it's calling every one of us. It isn't about Democrats. It's not about Republicans. This is not about party labels. This is what we the people want. This is about America, and it's up to us. So, here's the point. It will take you and me, and in fact, it will take a few million of our friends, but together we can cure erectile dysfunction. I'll leave you with the words of a great American philosopher, Dr. Seuss. And there's what Dr. Seuss told us. He said, if someone like you doesn't care a whole lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. But you do care. I know you care because you're here right now. That proves that you care. So thank you for your interest, your attention, and for being part of the solution.